शलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै गुरुवे नमः।
श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरुं श्रीयुतपदकमलं
रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं स्वावधूतं परिजनासाहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितं हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धो जगद्पते गोपीश गोपिका कान्ता राधा कान्ता नमोस्तुते तप्त काञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे राम।
Soni Mataji, you are muted. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
I would like to recognize the presence of Prabhu Kamal Panchal Prabhu. I didn't get your initiated name, sorry. And also of Ramnam Das, it's my son-in-law there. Today we are on 18, text 19, text 18?
17, is it?
Text 17, yeah, text 17, sorry, yeah. Okay, so how do you want us to go about it, Prabhuji? We usually read the text and then we maybe hand it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Or I'm happy to read the text. Yeah.
Right.
So I just want to say thank you so much to Kartika Mataji, Self Mataji, and all the devotees here for this opportunity to purify myself. So please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. And perhaps I'll start by reciting the Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Prabhuji, before you start, if you don't mind, kindly let me introduce you to the group.
Absolutely.
Since this is your first time, Prabhuji, usually that is our procedure. So Hare Krishna, everybody. I'm very happy that ISKCON Juja has joined. If you can just put on your video just for a second so Prabhuji can see you. Everybody, Peter Muli, Priya, so that Prabhuji can see you and have your darshan. Prabhuji, our internet is not very good over here, so it doesn't support the video. So people just switch it off, but it might be just one name, but there are 4 or 5 people there. So we have a good group of people here. ISKCON Juja is our latest baby. So from Nairobi, Kisumu and Mombasa are where the temples are. But 2 years ago, they've set up a center here in Eldoret. And then ISKCON Juja was the next one. And now we are starting a center even in Nakuru. And from Nakuru, we also have Arya Govinda Das Prabhuji. We are very fortunate to have his association as well. So Prabhuji, Krishna consciousness is spreading like wildfire here in Kenya as well. This is just so that you know about us. Eldoret is a very small town, but we are trying our best. That is us, Prabhuji. But let me introduce dear devotees to Kamal Prabhuji, whom I have been asking since a year to join this group. And I'm so happy that he's been able to do that. Prabhuji is practicing Krishna consciousness since the last 7 years. And in 2015, he completed several courses at the Bhaktivedanta Manor, which is in England, and spent 1 year living there as a brahmachari, during which time he completed his Bhakti Shastri course. He has been involved in all the services. We know about book distribution, class scheduling, and Bhagavad Gita classes. Professionally, Prabhuji is a solutions architect. And to add to his repertoire, he is now a trainee psychotherapist as well. And he hopes to use this ability to help devotee care within the community. So Prabhuji, that's really good because mental health is a big issue. So I'm really grateful to you that we have an expert among us as well. So please accept our humble obeisances from everybody in this group who have joined and will be joining. People just drop in the next 5 minutes, Prabhuji. So, but I've muted them so they won't cause any disturbances, Prabhuji. So thank you very much for your time. And in case we get cut off, because this link is not continuous, probably kindly rejoin again. Okay. Thank you. Over to you, no Soni Mataji. I'm going to keep shut now. It's your session. And over to you, Prabhuji, as well.
Okay.
Over to you, Prabhuji.
Thank you very much. So thank you for the kind introduction. I'm feeling a little bit kind of very humbled and embarrassed almost to be speaking, but hopefully, because I'm very unqualified, but hopefully I can facilitate some discussion, and hopefully we can enable, we can all learn something from this, and I can also learn by discussing with you. So today we're reciting verse 17 of the 18th chapter. I'm first going to just recite the prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading verse 17. Yasya nahan krito bhavo. Sorry, so just think there's some background noise. Is it Pavan Prabhu? Is it okay if we yeah, thank you Prabhu, sorry. Yasya nahan krito bhavo buddhir yasya na lipyate advapi sa imalokan nahanti na nabadyate. So translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. One who is not motivated by false ego, whose intelligence is not entangled, though he kills men in this world, does not kill, nor is he bound by his actions. So as it's a very small purport, I wanted to, if that's okay, read the purport as well by Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, the Lord informs Arjuna that the desire not to fight arises from false ego. Arjun thought himself to be the doer of action, but he did not consider the supreme sanction within and without. If one does not know that a super sanction is there, why should he act? But one who knows the instruments of work, himself as the worker, and the Supreme Lord as the supreme sanctioner, is perfect in doing everything. Such a person is never an illusion. Personal activity and responsibility arise from false ego and godlessness, or a lack of Krishna consciousness. Anyone who is acting in Krishna consciousness under the direction of the super soul or the supreme personality of Godhead, even though killing does not kill, nor is he ever affected by the reaction of such killing. When such a soldier under the command of a superior officer, he is not subject to be judged. But if a soldier kills on his own personal account, then he is certainly judged by a court of law. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So there's two of this wonderful, such a wonderful verse. And on this theme of us not being the doers, I know that Madan Gopal probably gave such a lovely class yesterday. I just want to further compound this point and talk about two key concepts in relation to this verse and this chapter, which is how are we not the doer? So we often hear this concept, we're not the doer, but how does this look like? And maybe can we discuss some examples of this? And the second point I wanted to make is how to practice this. How do we imbibe this mentality within our minds that we're not the doer when we're so conditioned to think that we are? So I'd like to begin with a small pastime from the Mahabharata, which I feel illustrates nicely how we're not the doers. So I'm sure you're all very familiar with the Mahabharata and the Battle of Kurukshetra. So right before the battle was to begin, they entered a personality who approached Krishna and the Pandavas. And this personality was well known to them both. And his name was Barbrik. So Barbrik, in fact, was the grandson of Lord Bhim and the son of Ghatotoch. So he was actually the ancestry of demon. As you know, you may know, Bhim had a son with a demon called Hidimbi, called Ghatotoch, and his son was Barbrik. Now, upon approaching, the Pandavas were overjoyed because Barbrik was a very, very powerful warrior. In fact, it was said that the only person just as powerful as Barbrik was Lord Bhishma Dev. So upon seeing him, the Pandavas were overjoyed, but Krishna wasn't convinced. And he asked Barbrik to display his power. So Barbrik, he gave him a challenge. Krishna pointed to a tree and asked Barbrik to clean that tree of leaves. So Barbrik lifted his arrows and let go. Just before he'd let go of his arrows, Krishna grabbed one leaf from the tree and put it under his foot. Barbrik's arrows spun around the tree, and before you know it, all the leaves on the tree had gone by his special arrows, and everyone was cheering. The final arrow came and was spinning around Krishna's foot, at which point Krishna lifted his foot and the arrow went straight through. Everyone was overjoyed at the display of power that Barbrik had shown. But then something interesting happened. Krishna took out his sword and removed the head of Barbrik. So obviously this was shocking. But even more shocking that Barbrik's head was floating there and still alive. So Krishna then explained to Barbrik and the others around that Barbrik had made a special promise to his mother, which he was bound by. Barbrik was a mercenary, and he was bound to always fight on the weaker side. This meant that although immediately he would be fighting on the side of the Pandavas, because of course they were the weaker side. The Kauravas had 11 for every 7 of the Pandavas. But then Barbrik was such a warrior that he would kill so many Kauravas that they would become the weaker side. Then he would fight for the Kauravas. And like this, he would go backwards and forwards between both armies until he'd killed everyone. So obviously Krishna couldn't allow this. But because he'd done such a thing to him, he said to Barbrik, I will offer you any boon you wish. Now, Barbaric was a pure Kshatriya. So Kshatriyas, they like to engage in fighting. They also like to watch fighting. So Barbaric asked for the boon to be given the divine vision to see the entire battlefield and all the fighting in its fullest. So Krishna bestows upon him this boon. So battle takes place of Kurukshetra. And as we know, the Pandavas were successful. And Arjun and Bhim start walking off the battlefield, and they're both discussing with each other. Arjun says to Bhim, "Surely I killed the most warriors on the battlefield with my bow and arrow, on my chariot, with Krishna at my side." And Bhim says, "No. Surely I killed the most warriors with my mace and with my arrows. Scores of warriors were slain." And as they're walking off the battlefield, they hear something. They hear a laughter. Ha 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 ha. Oh, ha, ha, ha. A laughing in the distance. And they think, who dares laugh at us? And they look at the hilltop where the laughter is coming from, and they see a head. And of course, this is the head of Barbaric. So they question Barbaric, say, "Why are you laughing at us? Do you know who killed the most warriors on the battlefield?" So Barbaric, I said, "Yes." He says, "Yes, I know." And he explains to them, it was Krishna. Krishna killed the most warriors on the battlefield. Arjun and Bhima are shocked. They think Krishna did not fight on the battle of Kurukshetra. And then Barbaric explains to them, actually, Krishna killed everyone on that battlefield because he had the divine vision. He could see that it was Krishna who was firing the arrows. It was Krishna who was fighting with the sword. And Krishna, in fact, had expanded himself across the entire battlefield. So in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains to Arjun, actually, he says, Drona, Bhishma, Jayadadra, Karna, and other great warriors have already been destroyed by me. Therefore, kill them and do not be disturbed. Simply fight and you will vanquish your enemies in battle. So I thought this pastime was a nice example of how externally we may think Arjun, Bhim, they did all the killing, they did all the fighting. But actually, if we were given that spiritual vision, we can see that Krishna is really the doer. So how does bringing that back to maybe our lives, we've discussed earlier in this chapter that there are five factors for action. Does anyone know of these 5 factors? Can anyone remember them?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji,
Yes,
can I
Maji.
try?
Yeah. Yes, please.
So is it the soul, the super soul, the endeavors, the 5 senses?
Yes, and a place of action. Yes.
The
Thank
body.
you very much, Maji. Wonderfully. Yeah, the body. Yes, wonderfully remembered. So Srila Prabhupada actually explains early in the Bhagavad Gita that this concept of that every action must be sanctioned by the super soul within the heart, which is Krishna within the heart. So, and he gives the example of how it's like 2 birds sitting in a tree. One bird, which is the Atma, is sitting, enjoying the fruits of the tree, but enjoying the results of the actions. But the actions are only sanctioned by a second bird in the tree and is merely watching the actions of the first bird. Mataji mentioned that I spent some time in the ashram. So, but prior to that, I had many years of working in IT. And so when I actually joined the ashram, I quit my job and I went to live in the temple and spent a year as a brahmachari. But after spending a year, I realized that I was probably more suited to being a grihasta, and I spoke with seniors and so forth. So I left the ashram and I thought, okay, no big deal. I'll have no problem getting a job, because I always used to receive, recruiters would always contact me about jobs. I thought no problem. But then I left the ashram and started applying for many, many jobs. And I didn't get any interviews. So it'd been about a month and I had no interviews, no job prospects. And I started becoming overcome with anxiety. I was becoming very worried. I was thinking, oh no, like how, what am I going to do? I need to work. I need to earn some Lakshmi and I can't get a job. And then I remembered this concept and I remember thinking, if I've not learned nothing in all this time in Krishna consciousness, that my only power is my endeavor. All I can give is my endeavor. I'm not the doer, and the results are dependent upon Krishna. So I said, I said to myself, you know what? Let me just set myself a target, apply for a certain amount of jobs a day, and Krishna will provide a job when the time is right. And I kid you not, the very next week, as I shifted my mindset, I got some interviews and I ended up getting 3 job offers. And that just, I started laughing to myself and thinking, Krishna, I'll never learn. I'll always think I'm the doer. So this leads me on to my next point is, I thought this was some examples of how we're not the doer, but then how to practice this, how to kind of imbibe this mentality that we're not the doer and surrendering our results, because we often think we do something and we're acting in such a way that the results are dependent on us. So just to compound this point, there's a wonderful verse earlier in the Gita, a very famous verse, Karmanya evadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phalaheturbur ma te sangos tav karmani. You have a right to perform your prescribed duties, but you're not entitled to the results of your actions. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. So I have this, I used to keep this verse on my wall as a reminder to myself not to be attached to my results. So there's 3 things I'd like to mention in terms of cultivating that mindset, that not being attached to our results, which is, number 1 is offer our hearts and life to Krishna. And I'll talk about how perhaps more we can do this. Cultivate within the mind, whatever I'm doing is for Krishna. And the 3rd thing is do some direct service for Krishna, where we don't receive any of the results, and the results all go to Krishna. So the first one, offer our heart and life to Krishna. So in relation to this, for some reason, the first person I thought about was Devotee, in fact, was Draupadi. So Draupadi, the wife of the Pandavas, a pure devotee of Krishna. And I was thinking about how she was, as we know, her husband Yudhishthira Maharaj was engaged in a gambling match, and he lost his mind to such a degree that he even gambled her. So even though he had no right to at that point, as he'd even lost himself. So Draupadi was dragged into the royal assembly by Dushashan, a member of the Kauravas, and Dushashan, in order to disgrace her, began to disrobe her. So Draupadi, obviously in so much distress, held on to try to fight off Dushashan and screamed out for Krishna, Krishna, but Krishna didn't come. Then finally she surrendered even more, lifted one arm in the air, called out, Krishna, help me, Krishna. Still, Krishna didn't come. Then finally, she gave up all hope of anything else, let go of both arms, called out, Krishna. A tear rolled down her eye, and through this tear, Krishna appeared and started feeding through robes, so that no matter how much Dushashan tried to disrobe her, she could never be dishonored, never be disrobed, because Krishna was always providing robe there. So why do I mention this pastime in particular in relation to offerings one heart and life to Krishna? Well, the last 2 years have been horrible, as I'm sure you can all relate to. You have been hit with this pandemic. So many people have been suffering. It's affected everyone in the world, myself included. And there's many times where we face difficulties in life, and we can, even it was discussed yesterday, we can think, why Krishna? Why are you doing this to me? Why is this happening? How can you allow me to suffer so much? And in those moments, as difficult as it may be, if we can practice this concept of surrendering to Krishna as Draupadi did, by thinking, perhaps reflecting on, okay, Krishna, I don't know why you're doing this to me, but I know that you have a greater reason for this, and reflect on, perhaps, Krishna, what is it that you're trying to teach me here? What is a greater lesson for me to learn? And this, I thought, is one way we can offer our heart to Krishna. So whether it's something bad that's happening, or whether it's something good that's happening, can we offer this to Krishna? Can we cultivate that mindset that perhaps, okay, Krishna, This is ultimately, results are all coming from you, not from me. And perhaps maybe when we look back at our life and see that we've gone through difficulties, we're still here. We've made it through. So that must mean that Krishna has our best interest in heart. We wouldn't be here right now. We've always made it through any difficulties. We've made it through. Or if we're going through difficulties now, he's pulling us through them. And can we mold our life around Krishna in such a way that facilitates our spiritual practice? So often, I know many people, including myself in the past, have practiced Krishna consciousness as something on the side. So I have my job, I have my family, I have my life, and Krishna consciousness is just something I do on the side. But instead, can we put Krishna in the center of our lives and mold our lives around it? So how does this look like practically? Perhaps, we're doing many activities, like many hobbies. Could we kind of reduce those? Do we have a job which is very difficult and very time consuming? Can we look to maybe forge a career path which allows us to build a life around our Krishna consciousness rather than have it as something on the side? So that is something I want to speak about regarding offering our heart and life to Krishna. The second point in terms of cultivating this mindset, as I said, cultivate within the mind, whatever I'm doing is for Krishna. So how can we do this? So there's a wonderful pastime here of the Gandicia Temple. So Lord Chaitanya is an incarnation of Krishna in his most merciful form. And there was one point in the life of Lord Chaitanya where he took his devotees to a temple called the Gandicia Temple, which is about 2 miles northeast of Jagannath Temple. So if anyone here has been to Jagannath Puri, I can see someone, Peter Prabhu has got Jagannath there on his as his background. So obviously Jagannath Puri, a very, very famous temple. And 2 miles from there, Lord Chaitanya took his devotees to the Gandicia Temple and asked them to clean it. So his servants brought many, many brooms, many, many cleaning instruments, hundreds of brooms to clean this temple. And Lord Chaitanya himself engaged in cleaning of this temple with his devotees. Even though they wished him not to, they all engaged in cleaning of the temple, sweeping and cleaning and wiping. As they were cleaning, the devotees noticed Lord Chaitanya himself would clean the temple and gather the dust and the dirt in a cloth and put that cloth outside the temple. And as such, he was building up a pile of dirt. So the devotees, seeing Lord Chaitanya do this, they copied him. They imitated his technique, gathered the dirt and formed it in a pile outside the temple. But no matter how much the devotees gathered dirt and outside the temple, collectively, their pile of dirt was always much smaller than the pile of dirt that Lord Chaitanya himself had gathered. So the acharyas explained that this concept is that our duty is, again, compounding the concept that our duty is only to endeavor. We just have to try, but ultimately it's the Lord that will clean our hearts. We just have to try in our practice of Krishna consciousness. And it's very much more an internal mindset. Krishna consciousness, although we do many, many external activities, ultimately it's the mood in which we do the activities which Krishna really sees. So I'd like to give an example from my own life of how this internal mindset is very, very important. So before Corona and the pandemic hit, I would give Bhagavad Gita classes sometimes on a Sunday at our temple in London, the Bhaktivedanta Manor. So on one occasion, I was asked to give a class, and at that time I was very busy with work, and I had little realization, little thoughts on the verse itself. But I didn't want to turn down the service and let people down. So I decided to give the class, but I was very worried. I was in a lot of anxiety. So I prayed to the deities, Radha Gokulananda, Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman, Gaur Nitai, and I prayed to Prabhupada. And I said to them all, I said, please, please, if you so desire, help me do this service nicely. Help me help the devotees and give them some Krishna Katha, and for my own purification, if you so wish. So I sat down, I gave the class, and so in the class there were about 30 people, and thankfully everyone stayed till the end. Everyone, there were many questions afterwards, and even received a round of applause. So I thought, oh wow, okay, I've done some nice service. But then, so I had the right mindset, but then I was asked to give a class many weeks later. And in this verse that we're discussing today, Krishna says, one who's not motivated by false ego. Now, I'm ashamed to admit, unfortunately, on some level, I thought, okay, I didn't even prepare so much for that class and I got so much applause. So next time, maybe if I give 3 or 4 times the amount of endeavor and prepare 4 times as much, I'll get 4 times the amount of appreciation and applause. So I prepared really hard for this next class. I referenced lots of different Shastra. I consulted different classes. I sat down to give the class, and there were about 30, 40 people there. And as I was giving the class, people started leaving. So by the end of the class, there were only 2 people left. And at the end of the class, I ended the class and there was silence, no questions, nothing, which shows that maybe perhaps the class wasn't so interesting for people. Then at the end of the class, a Mataji approached me. I thought, okay, at least someone has got a question. But no, it wasn't a question. The Mataji approached me to tell me how to give a better class. So in this way, you can see I gave 2 classes. In one class, I actually endeavored more, but the result was very different. And what was the difference was my internal mood. So the first time I gave the class, my mood, although not pure by any means, but my mood was mainly to serve Krishna, to please the devotees and help people. Well, my second class I gave, the mood was more, although it was mixed, there definitely was some false ego, some need for appreciation, some need for applause. And Krishna showed me right there that actually it's not, the results aren't due to my endeavor. I can prep 10, 20 times as much, but ultimately the results are coming from him. So I thought that was a practical example of, in my own life, of how this has happened. So how do we cultivate this? How do we cultivate this mindset towards Krishna? So in the 9th chapter, Krishna tells Arjun, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. So whatever we're doing for Krishna, can we slowly start offering that, whether it's what we cook, whether we're taking some exams and we receive a good result, whether it's we get a promotion at work, whether we do something nice from our family and receive that praise, can we slowly change within our minds and offer that to Krishna? So I know this is very, very difficult in practice. They say Krishna consciousness is a simple process, difficult application, because we're so conditioned to thinking. Say, I've recently started I enjoy cooking. I'll cook a nice meal. People may enjoy it. And I'll think, oh, yes, I did a good job. But can I really think, oh, no, actually, can I think perhaps Krishna, thank you so much for allowing me, using you as an instrument to cook this nice meal, which I've offered to you. And through your mercy, people are able to enjoy. So I like this analogy of how, I don't know, over there in Kenya, you have, here we call them motorways, you call them highways where cars go very fast, they're quite large. So you have highways. They say along a highway, cars go very quickly. They can speed down quickly. But then along the smaller roads, beaten paths, etc., they're much more harder to travel quickly. So this is kind of like our mindset. So because we're born in the material world, we're conditioned to think we're the doer. And automatically our mind, when we achieve something nice, whether it's a good exam result or anything good at work or anything in our lives, the highway of thought process is, I did this. But slowly we can start thinking, building these other pathways that actually, no, Krishna, you did this. Thank you so much. Thank you. And as we build these pathways and clear out these pathways and remove all the weeds from these other pathways, we can, we can move down, travel down more quickly. Conversely, the highways, if they're not maintained, they start to degrade, become harder to travel down. And eventually, as we build these other pathways, clear them out, start thinking more of Krishna, these other pathways will become the highway to us thinking of Krishna. So this is how it's a gradual process, how we can gradually practice, imbibe the mentality, and cultivate within our minds, whatever I'm doing it for Krishna. And finally, a final point, the third point I wish to make was do some direct service where the results go to Krishna. And there's no gain for me. So obviously, the foundation of our movement is chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Nam Nam, Hare Hare. In the morning when we chant, we're asking Krishna, please engage me in our service. And there's no other benefactor ultimately. We're doing this with the mindset that this is for Krishna's pleasure. Yes, ultimately we are getting benefit. We are getting spiritual benefit. But there's no material benefit for us there. And we're not asking for any material benefit. Well, this is the mindset we're trying to cultivate. Perhaps we can do some menial service for our local temple. We could go out and tell others about Krishna, or we can do some book distribution. And so through doing that, we're cultivating this love, this direct service for Krishna, where we're not really getting any material benefit. But what are we doing? What is the ultimate results of that? Is that we're developing and awakening a love for Krishna Prem, that will ultimately enable us to go back home, back to Godhead. So we discussed quite a lot here about concepts of how we're not the doer. We discussed how perhaps that plays out in different pastimes and even perhaps in my own life. And then we discussed 3 things on how to cultivate this mindset that we're not the doer by offering our heart and life to Krishna, surrendering our difficulties and our good results to Krishna as well, cultivate within the mind, create these new pathways, that whatever I'm doing is for Krishna and doing some direct service for Krishna. So those are just some thoughts on this verse, on this beautiful verse. Please forgive me for any mistakes, and I'd like to open up for any comments, corrections, or questions.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I think we don't have a lot of time, so can we rejoin again for the questions?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Get disconnected in a minute.